Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to talk about Below Zero, aka Bajo Cero. Let me start off by saying that if you are a fan of action or thriller movies at all, you are going to have a blast when you watch this movie. The plot of Below Zero centers on a cop named Martin, who's ordered by his police station to go and transport a group of prisoners from one prison to another. He's partnered with another cop named Montesinos in order to help carry out this transfer, and we see all the other prisoners that are getting transported out from one prison to the next, and we see their characters' personalities develop over the course of the story. I feel like I've reviewed a lot of drama movies recently that have a lot of themes and subtext behind them, so it's just great to be able to kick back and have a good time with this movie. You don't really have to think too much about these characters' personalities. There's not really anything in depth to them personality-wise, although that's not necessarily a bad thing. Each character has their own particular traits, with Martin obviously being the good cop and Montesinos leaning more towards the bad side of things. And of course you have the criminals in this movie as well, which I think there's about half a dozen of them or so in this film, and we get to see their personalities a little bit, but it's not really anything you have to think about or analyze too much. There's like this old guy who's an accountant thief, and he just wants to serve out the rest of his sentence in peace. He doesn't want any trouble. And then there's a couple other characters that you don't really think there's too much to them, but as the story progresses you think, whoa, these guys mean serious business. Anyway, getting back to the story, the transfer ends up going to hell in a handbasket as some random figure in the woods ends up putting a spike trap across the road, which leads the truck to stopping in the middle of the night in the middle of a foggy forest. And even though they were assisted by a cop car that had two other police officers in the middle of the transfer, it's not long until Martin is the only remaining cop and he has to hide out in the truck along with all the other criminals as he has to try to deal with an unseen force in the woods that's trying to kill him off one by one. And when I say kill him off one by one, I don't really mean that he wants to kill everyone in that truck necessarily. He only wants one figure on that truck, but they're not quick to give him up so easily. So the man in the woods does his absolute best to make sure to flush out everyone in the truck, even if it means having to kill people in the process. I just love the tense atmosphere in this movie. One by one, a bunch of bad things start happening in the truck. Heat gets cut off, the electricity cuts off, everyone starts plotting against each other inside the truck. There's just so many things that happen in such a tight claustrophobic setting that I honestly felt I was going to have a heart attack when I was watching some scenes. And the fact that it takes place in the middle of a dark, dense forest, there's all sorts of fog all over the place, and you never know where the bad guy is going to be, and he actually taunts them at the same time as all this is going on. He's got a walkie-talkie, he's always sending insults to different people, he's constantly mocking them and ridiculing them, and he knows he's got the upper hand on these guys, and that there's nothing that they can do in order to escape their situation other than to give up the guy that the man in the woods wants. There's a lot of family-related backstory that goes on in the movie, so I don't really want to spoil much more than that. You just gotta see the story play out to the end. It was so riveting and intense from beginning to end. I was thoroughly entertained when watching it. And it really helps that even though the vast majority of the characters in this film are criminals, they all have relatable backstories, and you grow to empathize with them as the story progresses, and they eventually start to partner up with each other and try to overcome the man in the woods' motivation to try and kill them. There were only a few things I didn't like about this movie as far as the action and story was concerned, and honestly, they're not really that big of a deal anyway. They're mostly just minor nitpicks that you kind of notice after the fact. For a movie that clearly advertises that it takes place in below 0-degree temperature, I feel that they didn't really take advantage of the cold premise enough. There's one scene in particular that involves ice-cold water, which I will not spoil because it is an extremely intense scene, probably the most intense scene in the movie. But whenever they're swimming in the water during that particular scene, there's only one character that's really severely affected by it, and it's like, aren't all of you human beings, aren't you all technically suffering hypothermia by now? Even before they did the whole water bit, it only felt like there was one scene whenever they talked about how cold it was getting in the truck, and then after that they just kind of brush it off and continue on with whatever else the guys are talking about inside. I also didn't like the fact that it had such a dull gray color scheme throughout the movie, although it didn't really bother me as much as in a movie like, say, Outside the Wire, where you think there would be a lot more variety as far as scenery was concerned. Understandably, there's not really much to this film. It mostly takes place in the truck, so you don't really mind the color scheme in this one too much. But sometimes it works against the film's story because it ends up being too dark to watch in some scenes and be able to tell what's going on without turning up the brightness to the max. In general, I don't really like when a movie or video game or any sort of visual story tries to hide its story from me. I don't want to have details hidden from me. I want to be able to enjoy everything in full right in front of my eyes, which is why in these types of movies and shows I end up turning the brightness all the way up to the max, and then there'll be a certain part of the movie that just really hurts my eyes, and it's just unbearable sometimes. Anyway, like I said, it doesn't happen enough to really bother me, but I would have preferred to have a little more variety as far as the color was concerned. Outside of these little things though, I highly recommend you watch this movie. It's very simple and straightforward in its premise, and it takes advantage of as much screen time as it can get, while providing a lot of interesting backstories for all the characters that are featured in it. Even the lowly criminals that we're supposed to hate right in the beginning, they actually have interesting motivations and backstories behind them. Obviously it's an action film first, so it's not going to be particularly deep. So as long as you know that going in, I promise you're going to be entertained. And even when watching it, you might find some things that have a little bit of subtext to them. Like there's all sorts of commentary going on about the inefficiency and often outright complete ambivalence to modern police systems in society. And we all see this unfold in Martine's eyes as the story progresses, and he starts to get more disenchanted with his job and his responsibilities as time goes on, and he has to deal with all the things that are taking place in the story. So the symbolism is there if you want to look for it, but if you're not particularly worried about trying to find it, then you don't really have to worry about it getting in the way in the story. It's a pretty straightforward, basic action movie, and it does its job really well. Anyways guys, that's going to be my review of Below Zero. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review All My Friends Are Dead. Bye bye!